I was tossing hay into the back of my old pickup when I first saw her Ashlyn Templeton, the newest tyrant of the Willow Bend Homeowners Association. She stood at the edge of the property line with her arms crossed, sunglasses perched like a crown of entitlement. I could practically hear the HOA handbook flipping in her head. "Excuse me," she shouted, stepping onto my gravel drive like she owned the place. "This pasture is community property. You can't just fence it off for your own use." I blinked and leaned on my pitchfork. "Community property. This land's been in my family since 1932. She sniffed and pulled a folded HOA map out of her oversized leather purse, the kind that always looked like it contained a small dog or lawsuit paperwork. "Well, according to our updated community zoning overlay, this entire section," she jabbed a finger at the map, "falls within Willow Bend's jurisdiction." "My ranch predates your subdivision by 70 years, I said, voice steady. "And your map doesn't override a deed recorded with the county." "I don't think you understand how HOAs work, Mr. Callahan," she said, flashing the kind of smile that usually came with a knife in the back. "We maintain community standards for everyone's benefit. You can't just opt out." I didn't respond. I just turned and walked back to my barn because I knew what this was an opening move. And Ashlyn Templeton didn't come across as the type to quit while she was behind. The next morning, a violation notice was duct-taped to my fence post in bright red lettering. "Unapproved agricultural structures within HOA boundaries. Cease use immediately or face fines." I laughed, out loud. My great-grandfather's barn was older than the town itself. I took the notice down, stuffed it in my glove box, and headed to the county clerk's office. 2 hours later, I had a certified copy of the original deed, including borders marked with hand-drawn ink and notarized back when people still wore fedoras unironically. I also snagged a copy of the town's last zoning map. My land was clearly outside Willow Bend's reach, but Ashlyn wasn't done. That weekend, she brought backup. 2 other HOA board members, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. She marched right up my drive again, this time with a clipboard. "We're here to conduct a visual inspection," she announced. "You've been reported for non-compliant fencing and unauthorized livestock." "The cows," I said, pointing at Daisy and Buster, my 2 old Herefords chewing cud like they were enjoying the show. "They're family. And this fence was built by my grandfather." Ashlyn ignored me and made a great show of snapping photos with her phone, muttering things like non-regulation wire and unsanctioned outbuildings. I noticed her friends were backing up toward their car. "You know," I said, holding up the deed, "trespassing's still illegal in this county." She froze mid-photo. "Unless you've got a court order or a sheriff's badge," I added. "You're welcome to leave before I call someone who does." Ashlyn's expression went from smug to sour in half a second. "You'll be hearing from our legal team, Mr. Callahan." I gave her a mock salute. "Looking forward to it." Monday morning came with a knock, not on my door but on my workshop window, an odd choice, considering the front porch was 20 feet away. I stepped out, still pulling on my flannel, and found a man in a pressed gray suit standing next to a black sedan with tinted windows. He looked like the kind of guy who wore cologne to bed. "Mr. Callahan?" he asked, flipping open a leather folder with a silver logo embossed in the corner. "Gregory Laramie, counsel for the Willow Bend Homeowners Association. I've been asked to deliver a formal cease and desist on behalf of my clients." I studied him for a beat. "You always sneak up on people's property through side gates, Gregory," he cleared his throat. "Your property's status is currently under review. My clients believe it falls within the jurisdiction of their governing charter as of the recent boundary expansion ratified last quarter. Unless your boundary expansion was approved by the county zoning board and signed off by the land registrar, you're standing on private land without permission. You want me to call the sheriff or you walking?" He hesitated, then extended the folder. "Just read it. You'll find the language very clear." I took it, flipped through a few pages. The legal jargon danced around the idea that Willow Bend had absorbed several adjacent lots after a vote held at a special session last February. They'd included parcel numbers mine among them, but no signatures from any government agency, no evidence of public notice, no survey documentation. Just a piece of paper with a lot of bold lettering and empty threats. "You folks voting yourselves into other people's yards now?" I asked, waving the folder. "That's how kingdoms used to work, not legal districts." Gregory gave a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm just the messenger. If you choose not to comply, we'll move forward with civil proceedings." "Good," I said. "Then I can countersue for fraudulent claims, harassment, and attempted land theft." He blinked. "That's a little dramatic." "Dramatic is showing up at dawn and pretending paper gives you power," I said, turning away. "Next time, bring a warrant." By Wednesday, I had a surveyor on the property, not just any surveyor Harold McClintock, who'd mapped half the county over the last 40 years. He arrived with a laser transit, satellite data, and a file cabinet of archived plats that made Gregory's cease and desist look like a grocery list. "You weren't jockin', Jack," Harold said, squinting at the old cedar post near the creek bed. "This stake's original. Still got the iron pins sunk beneath it. They don't make markers like these anymore. HOA's claiming I'm inside their borders." Harold snorted. "They'd have to move a river to make that true." By Friday, I had notarized copies of every boundary line from 1932 to present day. The ranch sat a full quarter-mile outside Willow Bend's easternmost lot. That should have been the end of it. But Saturday morning, I walked out to find orange flags staked in a line across my north pasture, each one marked "Future Fence Line HOA Property." Someone had even spray-painted a bright X on the side of my hay barn. I didn't call the sheriff. I drove straight to the county records office and met with Deputy Registrar Lynette Booker, a no-nonsense woman who'd worked zoning longer than most of the HOA board had been alive. "They filed what?" she asked, scrolling through her terminal. "Says here it's a provisional annexation filing," I said, sliding the copy across her desk. "They submitted it 3 weeks ago, backdated to February, claiming they got majority homeowner approval." She clicked a few more times, then leaned back with a whistle. "That's not how this works. They didn't submit any supporting documentation, no public hearing, no county review. They just uploaded a PDF and called it law. Is that even legal?" She cracked her knuckles. "Jack, what they did isn't just invalid, it's criminal. Falsifying public records is a felony in this state. I'm forwarding this to the district attorney." I left with a signed affidavit and a digital copy of the county's formal rejection of the annexation, but I wasn't satisfied with letting the law crawl at its usual pace. I knew Ashlyn wouldn't stop until someone stopped her. That evening, I hosted a bonfire and invited every neighbor bordering Willow Bend's edge. Most of them were folks I hadn't spoken with in months, people who had slowly retreated as the HOA's influence crept outward. I brought out my projector and broadcast the whole mess on the side of my barn. The fake filing, the unauthorized fence proposal, even the photo of the spray-painted X someone had taken while they were trespassing. "They're trying to claim land that doesn't belong to them," I said, pointing to the map Harold had produced. "If they can do it to me, they can do it to you." Murmurs turned to outrage. A retired firefighter named Vince stood up and said his daughter's backyard had mysteriously shrunk 5 feet according to a new HOA fence line. Another neighbor, Eileen, said they'd been fined for a shed that had been approved decades ago. No one had ever questioned it until now. We formed a coalition that night, not just to push back but to hold them accountable. Monday came with a different kind of knock. Sheriff Mandy Rojas, flanked by 2 deputies, arrived at the HOA clubhouse on Willow Bend's main circle. They weren't there for coffee. A warrant had been issued for seizure of all annexation documentation, pending investigation into falsified filings and misappropriation of property. By noon, Ashlyn was pacing in heels across her manicured front lawn, trying to keep her voice down while being questioned. Gregory Laramie showed up an hour later looking 10 degrees less polished, trying to stop the seizure of files, but the deputies weren't interested in his objections. That same day, a public statement from the county zoning board was released. No approval has ever been granted to the Willow Bend Homeowners Association to annex or claim jurisdiction over any properties beyond their original chartered limits. Any attempt to enforce such claims will be considered unlawful. Ashlyn tried to call an emergency HOA meeting that night. Only 2 board members showed up. The rest had either resigned or refused to be associated with the scandal. Just before sunset, a knock came on my door. It was a young man, barely 20, dressed in work boots and a faded hoodie. He introduced himself as Tyler, a temp the HOA had hired for maintenance. "I'm the one who painted the X," he admitted, eyes low. "They told me it was part of a new community improvement project." "I didn't know it was on private property, I swear." I nodded slowly. "You willing to write that in a statement?" He looked up. "Already did." "Gave it to the sheriff this morning." As the sun dropped below the ridge, I stood by the fence line with Harold, watching the last of the orange flags get pulled from the soil. "You think she'll try again?" he asked, brushing dirt from his hands. "Probably," I said. "But next time, she won't have half the neighborhood backing her. And she sure as hell won't have fake paperwork to hide behind." From the road, I could see Ashlyn standing at her window, blinds drawn tight but not tight enough to hide the fact that she was watching. Watching her kingdom fall apart, one lie at a time. Tuesday morning, I was repairing a busted hinge on the chicken coop when a county utility truck rolled up the gravel path. The driver leaned out, holding a clipboard and looking confused. "You Jack Callahan?" he asked. "That's me. Got a service order here says we're supposed to shut off water to this property for unpaid HOA maintenance dues." I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked over. "You see a meter on that order?" He flipped a page. "Nope. Just an address and a directive from Willow Bend Association." I motioned him toward the barn. "Come see for yourself." Tucked behind the barn was my private wellhead, legally permitted and installed long before the subdivision even existed. The guy scratched his head, took a photo of the well tag, and muttered something under his breath. "This doesn't make sense," he said. "Your water's not even tied into the municipal grid." "They're bluffing, or worse," I said. "Mind leaving me a copy of that order?" He handed it over, then climbed back into his truck. "I'll report it. Shouldn't have come here in the first place." By noon, I was in the county utilities office with the document in hand. The clerk behind the counter squinted at it, then disappeared into a back room. When she returned, she had someone with her, a supervisor named Darren, who looked like he'd just bitten into a lemon. "This isn't an official service order," he said, tapping the printed header. "It's a forgery." He pulled up the real database on his monitor and turned the screen toward me. "No work order was ever submitted for your parcel. This form uses our old logo. We changed that 3 years ago." "Can I get that in writing?" I asked. "You'll get it notarized," Darren said. "And I'll be forwarding this to the district attorney's office. This is the 3rd time this month someone's reported suspicious documents linked to that HOA." Back at the ranch, I found a white SUV idling just past the cattle gate. A woman in a navy pantsuit stepped out when she saw me approach. Her heels sank slightly into the dirt, but she didn't seem to notice. "Mr. Callahan," she said. "My name is Detective Marla Sedgwick with the County Financial Crimes Task Force. I understand you've had multiple incidents involving the Willow Bend HOA. I opened the folder of documents I'd just collected. They forged a utility shut-off notice." She took the pages, flipping through each one with a practiced eye. "We've been investigating them for several months. They've been submitting altered property records, issuing illegal fines, and even redirecting dues into undisclosed accounts. Until now, it's all been internal. But this." She held up the water shutoff order. "This is the first time they've gone after someone outside their jurisdiction. They tried to annex my land with fake filings," I added. "We're aware." That's part of why I'm here. She explained that a whistleblower, a former HOA treasurer, had come forward last week with detailed records, including emails between Ashlyn and Gregory. They'd been discussing ways to quietly expand the HOA's reach to increase dues revenue and secure control over adjacent undeveloped parcels. My ranch, with its open landscape and lack of legal entanglements, had been a prime target. They thought if they pressured you enough, she said, you'd sell or cave. I crossed my arms. They've got the wrong cowboy. She smiled faintly. We're preparing warrants. Financial records, HOA meeting transcripts, even GPS logs from patrol vehicles were building a case for conspiracy to commit fraud, unauthorized property claims, and document falsification. But we'll need you to testify. Tell me when and where, I said. That evening, I called Vince, Eileen, and a few others from the coalition. We met at the old feed store, which had been converted into a community hall years earlier. As I laid out what the detective had told me, the room grew quiet. They tried to shut off your water, Vince said. That's not just harassment, that's sabotage, Eileen frowned. They fined me last year for a non-compliant fence. I paid it, but when I asked for documentation, they told me it was confidential. Another neighbor, a retired postal worker named Germain, stood up. I used to deliver certified mail to their treasurer's house. Big stacks of envelopes marked final notice and overdue statement. I thought it was just bills. But now I'm wondering if they were pocketing payments and not reporting them. I nodded. Then it's time we get everything on record. The next week, a public hearing was scheduled at the county courthouse. Not a trial, not yet, but a preliminary session to review the legitimacy of Willow Bend's filings and the scope of their unauthorized actions. The courtroom was packed. Neighbors filled every seat, and the hallway outside was lined with folks who'd never had a reason to step foot in a courthouse until now. Ashlyn arrived last, flanked by Gregory and a new attorney. She wore a blazer 2 sizes too sharp and carried herself like she was still in charge. But there was a jitter in her step, a tightness in her jaw that hadn't been there before. When my name was called, I walked to the witness stand and handed over the forged water shutoff notice, the county's rejection of their annexation attempt, and the notarized affidavit from Harold, the surveyor. Judge Ballinger, a woman known for her deadpan delivery and intolerance for nonsense, read through the stack silently. You're telling me the HOA attempted to seize land outside its charter by submitting a falsified map, then attempted to disrupt your utilities using a fabricated service order? Yes, ma'am. And you have evidence that their legal counsel was involved. I handed her a printed email chain that Detective Sedgwick had provided, with Gregory's name in the sender line. She turned to Ashlyn. Do you deny authorizing any of these actions? Ashlyn stood. Your Honor, we believed at the time belief is not a defense to fraud, Ballinger interrupted. Especially not when it's backed by fabricated documents. Gregory tried to interject, but the judge held up a hand. Mr. Laramie, your name appears on these filings. If you're going to speak, I suggest you do so very carefully. The hearing lasted 2 hours. By the end, the judge suspended all HOA enforcement actions pending the outcome of a criminal investigation. A temporary injunction was issued, freezing the HOA's bank accounts and barring any board member from contacting homeowners without written court approval. As we stepped outside, news crews were already waiting. Microphones were shoved toward me, questions flying. I said little, just that the community had a right to transparency and that abuse of authority, no matter how small, needed to be held accountable. That night, I returned to the ranch. The porch light flickered on as I approached, and I could hear the distant hum of cicadas cutting through the air. I stood at the edge of the field, looking out over the pasture where Daisy and Buster grazed without a care in the world. A young woman stepped out from a truck parked near the gate. I recognized her, Emily, the former treasurer who'd blown the whistle. I didn't know where else to go, she said. They're going to come after me. No, they're not, I said. They've already lost. She handed me a flash drive. Everything's on here. Internal memos, accounting spreadsheets, even video from a board meeting where Ashlyn said they'd own the whole block by year's end. I made backups. Gave one to the DA already. I took it and nodded. You did the right thing. A week later, Ashlyn was formally indicted on 6 felony charges. Gregory took a plea deal in exchange for testimony. Several homeowners filed a civil suit to recover their fines, and a special election was scheduled to dissolve the current HOA leadership entirely. But what stuck with me most wasn't the courtroom or the news coverage. It was the little things: the neighbor who brought over fresh eggs as a thank you, the kids who stopped by to feed the cows, the way people started waving again as they drove past the ranch. They'd tried to take something that didn't belong to them. What they gave me instead was a community that finally remembered how to stand together. The morning dew hadn't even burned off the pasture grass when Detective Sedgwick called me back to town. I'd just finished hitching the trailer for a feed run when she said, "We need you to come down to the county records annex. Something new turned up and we could use your eyes on it." I didn't ask questions. Just parked the truck and made the 40-minute drive with the windows down and the radio low. When I arrived, Sedgwick was waiting near the clerk's vault, clipboard in hand, her badge clipped to her belt in plain view. She looked more alert than last time, though not exactly pleased. "We ran a search through archived HOA filings to cross-reference any overlapping parcels," she said, walking me toward a row of sealed document boxes. "Found something interesting: 2 property transfer documents filed under your name. Different dates, different signatures." I raised an eyebrow. "I've never transferred anything, not a square inch." She opened the first box and pulled out a manila folder, sliding it across the table. I flipped it open. There it was, my parcel number, my name, and what looked like a sloppy signature scrawled across the bottom. Except it wasn't mine. The date on it was from 6 months ago, before any of this had started. "Who's the buyer?" I asked. She pointed to the lower corner. "A shell company, Lattice Creek Holdings. Registered just over a year ago." "And let me guess," I said, flipping the page, "Ashlyn's name is tied to it somehow." "Her husband is listed as the registered agent," Sedgwick confirmed. "Real estate attorney, retired, moved to Willow Bend 2 years ago." I leaned back in the chair. "They were trying to steal the deed before the annexation even failed," she nodded. "We believe they were attempting a quiet title claim. If you hadn't caught wind of the annexation, they might have tried to push it through while you were unaware. That changed everything." Falsifying utility claims and fake annexation were one thing. Forging property transfers and attempting to take legal ownership of someone's land, that was grand theft, plain and simple. Sedgwick didn't waste time. She escorted me to the DA's office, where an assistant prosecutor named Kendra Nolan had already begun drafting a new set of warrants. This time, the charges included felony forgery, conspiracy to commit real estate fraud, and attempted unlawful seizure of land via fraudulent conveyance. "These aren't misdemeanors anymore," Kendra said. "This is prison time." The next day, county investigators served a search warrant on the Templeton house. I didn't go near it, but I heard from others that the street was lined with squad cars, and Ashlyn's front door was taken right off the hinges when she refused to open it. They found everything: digital drafts of the forged documents, notes on how to manipulate HOA vote records, and a spreadsheet tracking projected profits from reclaimed border lots. My name was on the top of that list. Within 72 hours, Ashlyn was arrested at her sister's property 2 counties over. Her husband was picked up in a hotel lobby in Austin, trying to check in under a fake name. Authorities froze their accounts and impounded 2 vehicles registered under Lattice Creek Holdings. But what no one expected was what came next. During the forensic sweep of the Templeton house, investigators uncovered a locked file cabinet in the basement. Inside were dozens of sealed envelopes, each labeled with a different homeowner's name. Inside each envelope, copies of personal checks, private correspondence, and in some cases blackmail material. Turns out Ashlyn hadn't just been power hungry. She'd been deliberately coercing votes and silence from board members and residents alike for over a year. One envelope had photos of a board member's teenage son's spray painting a stop sign. Another had tax documents someone clearly didn't want public. This wasn't just corruption. It was organized manipulation. The fallout was swift. The remaining board members resigned en masse. The HOA's legal charter was suspended by emergency vote under state supervision. A temporary oversight administrator was appointed by the county, and a full forensic audit began within days. Meanwhile, I had my own cleanup to do. The fake transfer filing had to be formally nullified, which meant swearing under oath, allowing handwriting experts to compare signatures, and sitting through a deposition with Kendra and 2 court clerks. Hard to believe they thought this would stick, I said, signing the last of the affidavits. Kendra shook her head. People like Ashlyn count on others being too busy or too tired to fight back. You didn't just push back, you exposed a whole web. After that, things settled in a strange way. Quiet, but not the kind that made you uneasy, the kind that returns when a storm's passed. Neighbors started stopping by again, not just to talk, but to help. Vince showed up one morning with a post-hole digger and spent 4 hours helping me rebuild the split-rail fence by the east gate. Eileen organized a rotating roster of volunteers to repaint the old community center and turn it into a neutral meeting hall, free from HOA influence. Jermaine, the retired postman, was voted in as interim community liaison, tasked with representing our interests to the county while a new, stripped-down neighborhood council was formed. The ranch itself had come out of the ordeal untouched, but something about it felt sturdier now. Not the buildings or the land, but the roots. Generations of Callahans had worked this soil, and for a minute there, I'd almost lost it to paper lies. But now, every sunrise felt like a quiet victory. One afternoon, I was sitting on the porch when a silver sedan pulled up the drive. A woman stepped out, maybe mid-30s, with a notepad and a press badge. "You Jack Callahan?" she asked. Depends who's asking. "Emily Reyes, investigative journalist. I've been covering HOA corruption for a while." "Word is you took down one of the worst in the state." I motioned to the extra chair. "Worst I've seen, that's for sure." She sat, flipping open her notepad. "Most folks don't fight back. They just pay the fines or move. Most folks don't have 100 years of family buried in their soil," I said. "You fight harder when it's not just about land, it's about legacy." She scribbled something, then looked up. "What would you say to other homeowners dealing with HOAs like this?" I thought about it for a moment, watching Buster lumber across the field. Know your rights, know your land, and never let a clipboard and a fake smile make you forget who it really belongs to. She nodded, stood, and thanked me. As her car disappeared down the gravel road, I looked out across the pasture, the wind moving through the grass like it always had. No red flags, no spray paint, no phony maps, just home. And this time it was staying that way.